She chose excitement over stability, then came crawling back when excitement turned into a federal investigation. I met Hazel 3 years ago at a mutual friend's gallery opening in downtown Charleston, one of those pretentious art events where everyone sips wine and pretends to understand conceptual photography. I was there supporting my colleague Maria's underwater photography exhibit, nursing a craft beer and trying to look interested in conversations about artistic vision and emotional resonance. That's when I spotted her near the back wall, genuinely captivated by a series of coral reef photographs that most people were walking past without a second glance. She was asking the photographer detailed questions about the bleaching patterns and water temperature data behind the shots, stuff that actually mattered beyond just pretty colors and composition. I found myself walking over, not because she was stunning, though she absolutely was, but because she was the only person in the room treating the science behind the art as something worth understanding. I introduced myself as Logan, marine biology researcher at the South Carolina Aquarium, and she lit up with genuine curiosity about my work studying coastal ecosystem recovery after hurricane damage. Hazel told me she was a lifestyle blogger focused on sustainable living practices, building a following of about 15,000 people around wellness and environmental consciousness. She had this way of listening that made you feel like your research actually mattered to someone outside the academic bubble, asking follow-up questions that showed she was genuinely processing the information rather than just waiting for her turn to talk. We ended up talking until the gallery closed, then walked along the riverfront discussing everything from microplastics in the food chain to the ethics of captive breeding programs for endangered species. She mentioned she'd started taking pottery classes at the Riverside studio as a way to disconnect from social media and actually create something with her hands, and I found myself volunteering to join her the following week despite having zero artistic ability. That first pottery session was a complete disaster for both of us, but Hazel laughed off her lopsided bowl attempts and insisted we keep trying until we created something that wouldn't embarrass a third grader. Over the next few months, we fell into this comfortable rhythm of late-night conversations about conservation efforts, weekend pottery sessions where we slowly improved our techniques, and long walks through Charleston's historic district where she'd point out architectural details she wanted to feature in her sustainability content. Hazel was refreshingly down-to-earth despite her growing online presence, always asking thoughtful questions about marine research and genuinely interested in the day-to-day reality of working with rescued sea turtles and injured dolphins. She'd bring homemade coffee to my early morning shifts at the aquarium and sit quietly while I updated feeding schedules and water quality logs, never complaining about the unglamorous side of marine biology or the fact that half my wardrobe smelled permanently of saltwater and fish food. I started looking forward to those moments more than I probably should have, watching her scroll through her phone editing captions while I checked oxygen levels and prepared medication schedules for injured animals. She'd often help me photograph the rehabilitation process for our educational outreach programs, having a natural eye for capturing moments that showed the science without being overly clinical or boring. It was during one of these quiet mornings that she first mentioned Ryder, her ex-boyfriend who she described as an impulsive cryptocurrency trader who'd left her financially and emotionally devastated after their turbulent 3-year relationship. She trusted him with her entire savings account for what he promised were guaranteed returns on some new digital currency platform, only to discover he'd lost everything in a series of increasingly desperate trades trying to recover their initial losses. The financial betrayal was bad enough, she'd lost over $12,000, but the emotional manipulation had been worse, she explained with tears in her eyes as we watched the morning feeding routine. He'd convinced her that her dreams of building a sustainable lifestyle brand were naive and unrealistic, that she should focus on supporting his trading career instead of wasting time on environmental content that barely paid anything. According to Hazel, Ryder had this way of making her feel stupid for caring about anything that didn't generate immediate profit, constantly undermining her confidence while positioning himself as the only person who really understood how the world worked. He'd mock her pottery classes as childish hobbies and dismiss her aquarium visits as a waste of time that could be better spent networking with potential investors or researching market trends. I found myself becoming her steady foundation as she slowly regained trust in relationships, always available when she needed reassurance about her business decisions or comfort after particularly brutal comments from online trolls who questioned her authenticity. I helped her set up better financial boundaries, taught her basic investment principles that had nothing to do with cryptocurrency speculation, and encouraged her to pursue collaborations with legitimate environmental organizations that aligned with her values. Looking back now, I realize I was unknowingly establishing a pattern where I provided constant emotional labor and practical support while she focused entirely on rebuilding her confidence and expanding her platform. I told myself this was what good partners did for each other, that relationships required patience and compromise, especially when someone had been as thoroughly betrayed as Hazel had been by Ryder's reckless behavior and emotional abuse. I genuinely believed I was helping her heal from legitimate trauma, never recognizing that my constant availability and support were gradually becoming expected rather than appreciated. 6 months into our relationship, I'd basically become her unpaid therapist, business consultant, and emotional support system rolled into one, while she continued building her brand and growing her follower count with content that increasingly featured our dates and adventures together without ever acknowledging the planning and effort I put into making those experiences happen. The first email from the Berlin Marine Research Institute arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was preparing feeding schedules for our newest rescue, a juvenile loggerhead turtle with a damaged shell. Dr. Elena Richter, the Institute's director, had seen my published research on coastal ecosystem recovery and was inviting me to join their prestigious international marine conservation project studying microplastic contamination across European waters. The opportunity was incredible, exactly the kind of career advancement I'd been working toward for years, with full research funding, collaboration with leading oceanographers from 6 different countries, and access to cutting-edge laboratory facilities that made our aquarium setup look like a high school science project. The project would involve traveling to research stations along the Baltic and North Sea coastlines, working with teams from Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and the Netherlands to develop comprehensive data on plastic pollution's impact on marine ecosystems. I was reading through the detailed proposal when Hazel walked into the lab, already scrolling through her phone with that familiar expression of mild anxiety that meant her follower engagement was down or someone had criticized her latest sustainability post. I showed her the email, expecting excitement or at least interest in what could be a life-changing opportunity for my career. Instead, she barely glanced at the screen before launching into concerns about her upcoming wellness retreat collaboration and how leaving Charleston would completely derail her momentum just when her platform was really taking off. She'd worked so hard to build connections with local wellness influencers and sustainable lifestyle brands, she explained, and relocating to Europe would mean starting over from scratch in a completely different market where she didn't understand the cultural nuances or influencer landscape. I tried to explain that the Berlin position was temporary, probably 18 months maximum, and that international research experience would open doors I couldn't even imagine right now. But Hazel kept redirecting the conversation back to her content creation schedule, her brand partnerships that required her physical presence at Charleston events, and her growing network of wellness community contacts who were finally starting to take her seriously as an influencer worth collaborating with. The second invitation came 3 weeks later, this time with additional details about housing assistance, visa sponsorship, and potential publication opportunities in top-tier marine science journals that could establish me as a leading voice in international conservation research. Dr. Richter mentioned that they'd specifically requested me based on my innovative approach to ecosystem rehabilitation and that the project timeline was flexible if I needed a few extra months to arrange personal affairs. The research team was particularly interested in my work with injured marine animals and how rehabilitation techniques could inform broader ecosystem recovery strategies. I found Hazel in our apartment, editing photos from a sponsored wellness event, surrounded by ring lights and camera equipment that had gradually taken over our living room like some kind of small-scale television studio. When I brought up the Berlin opportunity again, she barely looked up from her laptop screen, instead launching into a detailed explanation of her latest collaboration with a sustainable skincare company that was considering her for a major campaign worth potentially $15,000. The timing couldn't be worse, she insisted, because Ryder had been commenting on her recent posts with what seemed like genuine business insights and market analysis that was actually helping her engagement rates climb steadily for the first time in months. I felt something cold settle in my stomach at the mention of his name, but Hazel quickly explained that he'd been reaching out through Instagram and LinkedIn with what appeared to be legitimate entrepreneurial advice about expanding her wellness brand into new markets. She showed me his recent comments, which I had to admit were thoughtful and professional, offering specific suggestions about content strategy and partnership opportunities that seemed genuinely helpful rather than manipulative or self-serving. His insights about wellness industry trends and sustainable lifestyle marketing were actually more sophisticated than anything I'd expected from someone who'd previously focused entirely on cryptocurrency speculation. According to Hazel, Ryder had completely changed his approach to business and life, focusing on legitimate wellness industry investments and sustainable lifestyle marketing rather than the reckless cryptocurrency speculation that had destroyed their relationship and her financial stability. He'd even apologized for his past behavior and acknowledged how his financial irresponsibility had damaged her trust and confidence, taking full responsibility for the losses and emotional manipulation that had left her so dependent on my support and guidance. She appreciated that he was finally treating her business goals with respect instead of dismissing her environmental content as naive idealism, and his market insights were actually helping her make better decisions about brand partnerships and content direction. His reformed perspective on sustainable wealth building seemed to align perfectly with her wellness platform, creating opportunities for collaboration that felt natural rather than forced. The third email from Dr. Richter arrived with a more urgent tone, explaining that the research project had received additional funding and they needed to finalize their international team within the next 6 weeks. She'd held my position as long as possible, but other qualified candidates were expressing interest and they couldn't wait indefinitely for my decision. The project was moving into its next phase faster than anticipated, and they needed someone who could commit fully without personal complications or scheduling conflicts. I printed out the email and brought it to Hazel during her morning content creation routine, hoping that seeing the opportunity in writing might help her understand how significant this could be for my career and our future financial stability. Instead, she barely glanced at the papers before explaining that Ryder had just proposed a collaboration on a cryptocurrency wellness platform that could revolutionize how people approached financial health and sustainable living. He'd learned from his previous mistakes and was now focused on education and transparency rather than get-rich-quick schemes, she assured me, showing me detailed business plans that actually looked professionally researched and legitimate. The platform would combine Hazel's wellness expertise with Ryder's reformed approach to financial planning, creating content that helped people build sustainable wealth while making environmentally conscious choices about their investments and lifestyle decisions. She was excited about the potential to reach a much larger audience and finally monetize her passion for sustainability in a meaningful way that could actually support her lifestyle and future goals rather than requiring constant financial support from my aquarium salary. Over the following weeks, Ryder's presence in Hazel's content and daily routine became increasingly prominent, though she insisted it was purely professional collaboration rather than any kind of romantic reconnection. He'd appear in her Instagram stories offering market insights, comment thoughtfully on her posts about sustainable investing, and even contribute guest content for her blog about responsible cryptocurrency trading that focused on education rather than speculation. His comments were always professional and educational, focusing on helping her audience make better financial decisions rather than promoting specific investments or platforms that might benefit him personally. I watched this development with growing unease, but every time I brought up my concerns, Hazel would show me evidence of how much her engagement rates had improved and how many new followers were finding her content through Ryder's financial wellness angle. She was finally gaining traction in the competitive wellness influencer space, she explained, and couldn't abandon that momentum for my research opportunity that might or might not lead anywhere concrete. The deadline for the Berlin position was approaching fast, and Dr. Richter sent a final email requesting my decision within 72 hours so they could move forward with alternative candidates if necessary. I sat Hazel down for what I hoped would be a serious conversation about our future and the importance of supporting each other's career goals, but she immediately became defensive about her renewed partnership with Ryder and insistent that her business opportunities were just as valid and important as my research aspirations. She'd spent 3 years rebuilding her confidence and financial stability after Ryder's previous betrayal, and now that he was finally offering genuine business partnership and professional respect, she wasn't going to sabotage that progress for an uncertain international adventure that would disrupt everything she'd worked to build. The wellness conference afterparty was held at the Restoration Hotel's rooftop bar, one of those Charleston venues where the city's influencer crowd gathered to network and be seen. Hazel had been excited about the event for weeks, viewing it as a crucial opportunity to connect with potential brand partners and establish herself as a serious player in the wellness industry rather than just another lifestyle blogger trying to monetize her Instagram following. She'd spent hours perfecting her outfit and practicing her elevator pitch about sustainable living and financial wellness, and I'd agreed to attend as her supportive boyfriend despite having zero interest in wellness industry networking or listening to conversations about engagement rates and brand authenticity. The crowd was exactly what I'd expected: perfectly curated outfits, strategic conversation clusters, and enough ring lights and phone cameras to power a small television studio. Hazel immediately dove into networking mode, introducing herself to wellness coaches, supplement company representatives, and other lifestyle influencers with impressive follower counts and verified checkmarks. I found myself standing near the bar, nursing a craft beer and watching her work the room with practiced efficiency, genuinely impressed by her confidence and social skills even if the whole scene felt superficial and performance-driven. That's when Ryder arrived, fashionably late and wearing an expensive suit that screamed successful entrepreneur rather than the reckless cryptocurrency trader Hazel had described from their previous relationship. He moved through the crowd like he belonged there, exchanging business cards and engaging in animated conversations about market trends and investment opportunities with the kind of natural charisma that made people lean in and listen intently. When he spotted Hazel, his face lit up with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm, and he made his way over to our corner of the rooftop with the confidence of someone who knew he'd be welcomed with open arms. I watched their interaction carefully, looking for signs of the manipulation and emotional abuse Hazel had described, but their conversation seemed entirely professional and mutually beneficial. Ryder complimented her recent content strategy and mentioned specific engagement metrics that showed he'd been following her work closely, offering detailed insights about wellness industry trends that were clearly helping her refine her brand positioning and audience targeting strategies. They discussed potential collaboration opportunities, partnership strategies, and content ideas with the kind of productive energy I rarely saw when Hazel talked about her work with me. I felt increasingly like an outsider in their dynamic, contributing nothing to conversations about influencer marketing, brand partnerships, or sustainable lifestyle monetization strategies that seemed to energize both of them. When the topic turned to our relationship and my Berlin research opportunity, I tried to explain the significance of the position and how the international experience could benefit both our futures financially and professionally. But before I could finish describing the project details, Hazel cut me off with a dismissive laugh that carried clearly across our section of the rooftop, drawing attention from nearby conversation groups who turned to see what was causing the commotion. She announced loudly enough for half the party to hear that Logan was easily replaceable as a boyfriend, but Ryder represented irreplaceable business vision that could actually transform her career trajectory from amateur blogger to legitimate wellness industry influencer. The words hit me like a physical blow, not just because of their cruelty, but because she'd said them publicly in front of people who knew us both professionally and personally, including several of my colleagues from the aquarium who'd attended the event. The conversations around us gradually stopped as people processed what they'd just witnessed, creating an uncomfortable silence that seemed to stretch across the entire rooftop while everyone waited to see how this public relationship demolition would conclude. Hazel continued her public dismissal, apparently oblivious to the shocked expressions and uncomfortable glances being exchanged by everyone within earshot. She compared my boring stability unfavorably to Ryder's entrepreneurial excitement, explaining to the crowd that some people were content with predictable careers and small ambitions while others understood the importance of taking risks and building something meaningful that could actually impact the world. She described my research work as a hobby that paid decent money rather than a real career with growth potential, suggesting that marine biology was something people did when they lacked the vision and ambition for business ventures that could actually change people's lives. The humiliation was complete and intentional, designed to establish her renewed partnership with Ryder while simultaneously diminishing my value in front of our entire social circle. I stood there absorbing every word, maintaining composure while internally processing the fact that someone I'd supported through emotional recovery and financial rebuilding was now publicly discarding me like an inconvenient accessory. Ryder looked uncomfortable with the intensity of her dismissal, actually attempting to redirect the conversation toward more neutral topics, but Hazel was on a roll and clearly enjoying the attention and validation from the crowd. She talked about how relationships should support personal growth and professional advancement rather than holding people back from pursuing their dreams and reaching their full potential. According to her public declaration, I represented everything she was trying to move beyond: safe choices, limited thinking, and the kind of predictable lifestyle that prevented people from achieving real success and financial independence. When she finally finished her performance, the rooftop had fallen completely silent except for the background music and distant traffic noise from the streets below. I looked around at faces showing various mixtures of shock, embarrassment, and secondhand humiliation for what they'd just witnessed. These were people who knew us as a couple, who'd seen us together at pottery classes and aquarium events, who'd considered us stable and compatible partners building something together. Now they were watching that image implode in real time as Hazel chose to humiliate me publicly rather than have a private conversation about our different priorities and career goals. I finished my beer calmly, set the empty bottle on a nearby table, and walked to the elevator without saying another word to anyone. That night, sitting alone in our apartment surrounded by Hazel's ring lights and camera equipment, I pulled out my laptop and responded to Dr. Richter's email accepting the Berlin position and requesting the earliest possible start date. The decision felt inevitable rather than difficult, like finally acknowledging something I'd been avoiding for months. I spent the rest of the evening researching international moving companies and temporary housing options near the Research Institute, already mentally disconnecting from Charleston and the life I'd built here. When Hazel finally came home around 2 in the morning, slightly drunk and full of excitement about the connections she'd made and the business opportunities Ryder had helped facilitate, I was already in bed pretending to sleep. She talked animatedly about brand partnerships and collaboration possibilities while getting ready for bed, apparently having completely forgotten the public humiliation she'd subjected me to earlier that evening. The final break occurred 2 weeks later when Hazel announced she was taking a creative sabbatical from our relationship to focus entirely on launching her cryptocurrency wellness platform with Ryder as her business partner and creative collaborator. She needed space to explore this opportunity without the distraction of relationship obligations or the pressure to consider my career needs alongside her own professional development and creative vision. The 8 weeks that followed became a masterclass in strategic disengagement, orchestrated with the same methodical precision I applied to my marine research protocols. While Hazel threw herself into her cryptocurrency wellness venture with Ryder, spending increasingly long hours at coffee shops and co-working spaces developing their business plan and content strategy, I quietly began dismantling our shared life piece by piece without creating any drama or drawing attention to my systematic exit preparations. My first priority was transferring my ongoing research projects to colleagues at the aquarium without creating suspicion or drama that might reach Hazel through our overlapping social networks. Dr. Sarah Martinez, our head of marine rehabilitation, agreed to take over my sea turtle recovery program, and I spent several late evenings walking her through my data collection methods, treatment protocols, and the detailed behavioral observations I'd been documenting for each rescued animal. I framed the handover as temporary coverage while I explored the Berlin opportunity, never mentioning that I'd already accepted the position and was planning a permanent departure from Charleston. My colleague James volunteered to manage the microplastics research I'd been conducting in partnership with the University of South Carolina, and I systematically documented every aspect of the project, including water sampling techniques, laboratory analysis procedures, and the statistical models I'd developed for tracking pollution patterns across different coastal regions. The Berlin Institute had arranged temporary housing through their International Researcher Program, a small furnished apartment in the Mitt District near the lab facilities that would eliminate my need for the waterfront place Hazel and I had shared for almost 2 years. I contacted our landlord privately, explaining that my research position required relocating to Europe and that I'd be terminating my portion of the lease effective in 6 weeks. Since both our names were on the agreement, Hazel would need to qualify for the monthly rent independently or find a new living situation, but that was no longer my concern or responsibility after her public dismissal and creative sabbatical announcement. I listed our shared furniture and household items discreetly through online marketplaces and social media groups, selling everything except my personal belongings and specialized research equipment that would ship to Berlin. The process felt liberating rather than sad, each sold item representing another connection to our failed relationship that I could permanently sever without leaving any traces for Hazel to discover my departure plans. During this time, Hazel's attention was completely consumed by her business development sessions with Ryder, which seemed to involve lengthy strategy meetings at trendy cafes, networking events with wellness industry contacts, and weekend retreats focused on content creation and brand positioning for their cryptocurrency wellness platform. She'd return home late most evenings, energized by their progress and full of stories about potential investors, partnership opportunities, and the revolutionary impact their platform would have on financial wellness education and sustainable lifestyle choices. I listened politely to her updates while internally calculating shipping timelines for my laboratory equipment and research materials that would need specialized handling and climate-controlled transport for international delivery. Our mutual friends began noticing the growing distance between us, but I deflected their concerns with vague explanations about heavy research deadlines and the demanding preparation required for international collaboration projects. When Maria from the pottery studio asked directly about relationship troubles during our final class together, I simply mentioned that Hazel was exploring new business ventures that required significant time investment, while I was focusing on career advancement opportunities that might involve extended travel for research purposes. The responses were universally supportive, with friends encouraging both of us to pursue our individual professional goals while maintaining our strong partnership and supporting each other's dreams. None of them realized that the partnership had already been dissolved by mutual agreement, or that I was systematically erasing myself from Charleston while Hazel documented her renewed collaboration with Ryder across all social media platforms. Her Instagram stories became a constant stream of business meeting photos, inspirational quotes about entrepreneurship and risk-taking, and glimpses of the cryptocurrency wellness content they were developing together. She posted pictures of strategy sessions, coffee shop meetings, and collaborative workspaces with captions about building something meaningful with someone who shared her vision for transforming people's relationship with money and wellness through education rather than speculation. Ryder appeared increasingly frequently in her content, always professionally positioned as a business partner and mentor rather than romantic interest, but their chemistry and shared enthusiasm was obvious to anyone paying attention to their body language and collaborative energy. I watched this documentation of their renewed partnership with detachment rather than jealousy, recognizing it as confirmation that my decision to leave was correct and necessary for my own professional development and emotional well-being. The final 2 weeks of my exit strategy coincided perfectly with Hazel's business trip to Miami for what she described as Ryder's Crypto Wellness Summit, a networking event that would introduce their platform to potential investors and wellness industry leaders from across the Southeast. She was incredibly excited about the opportunity, viewing it as validation that their collaboration was gaining serious traction and industry recognition beyond Charleston's small wellness community. While she was away posting Instagram updates from poolside meetings and beachfront strategy sessions with other wellness entrepreneurs, I completed the final phase of my departure preparations. My research equipment and personal belongings were packed and shipped to Berlin through specialized international moving services. My aquarium projects were fully transferred to colleagues with detailed documentation, and my portion of our shared apartment was completely cleared out down to the last book and coffee mug. I left no forwarding address and arranged for my mail to be forwarded directly to the Berlin Institute's administrative office. The transformation was so complete that when I walked through the apartment one final time before heading to the airport, it looked like I'd never lived there at all. Hazel's ring lights, camera equipment, and influencer paraphernalia dominated the space, while every trace of my presence had been methodically eliminated. I left a simple note on the kitchen counter explaining that I'd accepted the Berlin position and would be departing immediately, wishing her success with her new venture and suggesting she contact the landlord about lease modifications. The note was polite but final, offering no contact information or suggestions for future communication. By the time Hazel returned from Miami, full of excitement about investor interest and partnership possibilities, I was already settling into my new apartment in Berlin, surrounded by unpacked research materials and international collaboration opportunities that represented everything I'd been working toward for years. Berlin embraced me with the kind of intellectual energy I'd been craving for years without realizing it. The Marine Research Institute occupied a sleek glass building in the Mid-District, where cutting-edge laboratory facilities shared space with collaborative work areas designed to encourage interdisciplinary conversation and innovation. My first week involved orientation sessions with researchers from 6 different countries, each bringing unique perspectives on ocean conservation that made our Charleston Aquarium work seem quaint by comparison. Dr. Elena Richter introduced me to the team as their new microplastic specialist, and within days I was collaborating on research projects that would have taken months to approve through American institutional bureaucracy. The international atmosphere was invigorating in ways I hadn't anticipated, with colleagues who switched effortlessly between German, English, and scientific terminology while discussing breakthrough methodologies for tracking plastic contamination across European coastal systems. My apartment in Hackeshire Market put me within walking distance of weekend farmers markets where vendors sold everything from locally sourced honey to handcrafted pottery that reminded me of those Charleston studio sessions. Except here the conversations happened in 3 languages and involved discussions of sustainable agriculture practices across different European climates. I started exploring Berlin's weekend offerings with the same methodical curiosity I applied to research, discovering underground jazz clubs in converted bunkers where musicians from across Eastern Europe gathered to experiment with traditional folk influences and modern improvisation. The city's energy was infectious, pulling me into a social scene I'd never experienced in Charleston's smaller, more predictable social circles. My research team quickly became my primary social group, introducing me to their network of international academics, environmental activists, and policy researchers who gathered regularly at beer gardens and riverside cafes to debate everything from renewable energy implementation to the political implications of climate science. These conversations had substance and urgency that made wellness industry networking seem trivial by comparison, focusing on actual solutions rather than personal brand development and follower engagement metrics. Within 2 months, I was leading weekend research trips to coastal monitoring stations along the Baltic Sea, collecting water samples and documenting ecosystem changes with equipment that made our Charleston setup look like a middle school science fair project. The data we were gathering would contribute to policy recommendations for the European Union, giving my work immediate real-world impact rather than the educational outreach focus that had dominated my aquarium position. My colleagues included Dr. Astrid Larsen from Copenhagen, whose groundbreaking research on jellyfish population dynamics was revolutionizing marine ecosystem modeling, and Dr. Marco Benedetti from Venice, who developed innovative techniques for measuring microplastic absorption in different species of fish and crustaceans. Working alongside researchers of this caliber pushed me to develop new analytical approaches and statistical models that were already generating interest from peer-reviewed journals. The Berlin lifestyle suited me perfectly, combining serious intellectual work with a vibrant cultural scene that offered constant opportunities for exploration and growth. I started taking German language classes at the Goethe Institute, joining weekend hiking groups that explored the countryside surrounding Berlin, and attending classical music performances at venues that had been operating since the 18th century. My social calendar filled naturally with invitations to dinner parties hosted by fellow researchers, gallery openings featuring environmental art installations, and academic conferences that brought together the brightest minds in European conservation science. Meanwhile, our mutual friends from Charleston provided occasional updates about Hazel and Ryder's increasingly public relationship through social media posts and casual conversations during video calls. Their wellness platform had launched with significant fanfare, featuring sponsored content about cryptocurrency investment strategies combined with sustainable lifestyle recommendations and mindfulness practices. Hazel's follower count had grown substantially, reaching over 50,000 subscribers who engaged enthusiastically with her content about financial wellness and environmental consciousness. The business appeared to be thriving, with regular posts about partnership announcements, speaking engagements at wellness conferences, and collaboration opportunities with established lifestyle brands. Ryder featured prominently in her content as both business partner and romantic interest, their relationship having evolved from professional collaboration to public couple status, complete with vacation photos and inspirational quotes about building meaningful connections with people who share your vision and values. I received these updates with complete emotional detachment, recognizing that their success validated my decision to leave rather than creating any sense of loss or regret. My life in Berlin had surpassed every expectation I'd held for international research opportunities, providing both professional advancement and personal fulfillment that I'd never experienced during my years supporting someone else's dreams while neglecting my own aspirations. The contrast was stark and undeniable. While Hazel built her influence through social media metrics and brand partnerships, I was contributing to scientific research that would inform environmental policy decisions affecting millions of people across multiple continents. 6 months into my Berlin experience, Dr. Richter approached me about extending my position indefinitely, explaining that my research contributions had exceeded their initial expectations and that the institute was prepared to offer me a permanent research fellowship with full benefits and opportunities for leadership roles in future projects. The offer represented everything I'd worked toward professionally, validating years of dedication to marine conservation research while providing a platform for making meaningful contributions to global environmental challenges. The first crack in Hazel's carefully curated wellness empire appeared on a Tuesday morning in October, exactly 10 months after I'd left Charleston for Berlin. I was reviewing water quality data from our latest Baltic Sea research expedition when my colleague Dr. Larson mentioned seeing an interesting news article about wellness influencer fraud in the American market. She showed me her phone displaying a Charleston Post and Courier headline that made my coffee go cold. Local wellness influencers under federal investigation for cryptocurrency health supplement scam. The article featured a photo of Hazel and Ryder at what appeared to be a recent wellness conference, both looking polished and professional in their coordinating business attire, completely unaware that federal investigators had been building a case against their platform for months while monitoring their financial transactions and gathering evidence about fraudulent business practices. According to the initial reporting, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had been monitoring their cryptocurrency wellness platform since its launch, tracking suspicious financial transactions and gathering evidence about fraudulent health claims related to their promoted supplement products. The investigation revealed that Ryder's reformed business approach was actually an elaborate multi-level marketing scheme disguised as wellness education, targeting vulnerable communities through social media manipulation and false promises about cryptocurrency returns combined with unproven health benefits from supplements that had never been properly tested for safety or efficacy. Federal agents had discovered that the supplements they'd been promoting through sponsored content contained unlicensed ingredients manufactured in overseas facilities with no FDA oversight, made unsubstantiated medical claims about everything from hormone regulation to cognitive enhancement, and were being sold at massively inflated prices to fund Ryder's increasingly desperate cryptocurrency trading activities that echoed his previous financial disasters but on a much larger scale. The platform's educational content about sustainable wealth building was revealed to be carefully crafted marketing copy designed to create trust and credibility while steering followers toward investment opportunities that primarily benefited Ryder and his network of associated scammers rather than the wellness community they claimed to serve. Sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques had been employed to create artificial urgency around investment opportunities and supplement purchases, with content designed to prey on followers' financial insecurities and health anxieties rather than providing genuine education about sustainable lifestyle choices. Hazel's role in the scheme appeared to be both knowing and unknowing, with investigators finding evidence that she'd initially believed in the platform's legitimacy but had continued promoting questionable products and investment strategies even after receiving complaints from followers who'd lost money or experienced adverse health effects from the supplements they'd purchased based on her enthusiastic recommendations and personal testimonials about dramatic improvements in her own wellness. Routine. The federal investigation had uncovered a complex web of shell companies, fraudulent cryptocurrency operations, and systematically exploited influencer networks that stretched across multiple states and involved dozens of wellness content creators who'd been manipulated into promoting Ryder's various business ventures without understanding the criminal nature of their participation or the potential legal liability they were assuming. Document seizures revealed that Ryder had been operating under multiple business identities simultaneously, creating false credentials and fabricating testimonials from supposed health experts and satisfied customers who either didn't exist or had never actually used the products they were allegedly endorsing through social media campaigns and wellness conference presentations. Over the following weeks, more details emerged through Charleston's local media and national wellness industry publications that painted an increasingly damaging picture of systematic fraud and manipulation that had been occurring across the wellness industry for years without adequate regulatory oversight or consumer protection measures. Ryder had apparently been operating multiple wellness platforms simultaneously, using different business names and partnerships to spread risk and maximize his ability to exploit wellness community trust while avoiding regulatory oversight and criminal prosecution, with each platform targeting different demographic segments of the wellness market to maximize his reach and minimize the likelihood of victims comparing notes about suspicious business practices. The health supplements that Hazel had been promoting with such enthusiasm contained ingredients that were not only unlicensed for human consumption but had been manufactured in facilities that lacked proper safety certifications and quality control measures, putting her entire follower base at potential risk for adverse reactions and long-term health complications that could result in additional civil liability beyond the financial fraud charges. Chemical analysis conducted by federal investigators revealed that several of the supplement products contained heavy metals, unlisted synthetic compounds, and contaminated botanical ingredients that posed serious health risks to consumers who'd trusted Hazel's recommendations and purchased products based on her personal endorsements and lifestyle integration demonstrations. Financial records seized during federal raids revealed that the cryptocurrency investment strategies they'd been promoting were essentially pyramid schemes designed to recruit new investors whose money would fund withdrawals for earlier participants while generating substantial commissions for Ryder and his inner circle of collaborators, with complex mathematical formulas designed to obscure the unsustainable nature of the returns being promised to new investors. The investigation uncovered evidence that Ryder had been systematically targeting wellness communities specifically because members tended to have higher levels of trust in peer recommendations and were more likely to make investment decisions based on emotional appeals rather than rigorous financial analysis, making them ideal victims for sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques designed to bypass rational decision-making processes. Hazel's Instagram account, which had grown to over 80,000 followers during her partnership with Ryder, became a liability overnight as angry subscribers demanded refunds for products that had failed to deliver promised results and investment opportunities that had resulted in significant financial losses rather than the sustainable wealth building that had been advertised through her carefully curated wellness content and lifestyle documentation. The comments sections of her recent posts became overwhelmed with testimonials from followers who trusted her recommendations and suffered both financial and health consequences, creating a public relations nightmare that no amount of damage control could adequately address, especially as media coverage amplified the voices of victims and drew additional attention to the scope and sophistication of the fraudulent scheme. Wellness brand partnerships that had taken months to establish were terminated immediately as companies distanced themselves from the scandal and sought to protect their own reputations from association with fraudulent health claims and criminal cryptocurrency operations, resulting in immediate loss of income streams that had been supporting Hazel's lifestyle and business operations. Sponsored content deals worth tens of thousands of dollars were canceled without compensation. Speaking engagements at wellness conferences were withdrawn along with associated travel and accommodation expenses, and collaboration opportunities with legitimate wellness professionals evaporated as the industry recognized the extent of the fraud and manipulation that had been occurring under the guise of sustainable lifestyle education and community building. The investigation revealed that Ryder had been systematically targeting wellness influencers with smaller, more trusting audiences because they were less likely to have legal representation or business experience that would help them identify fraudulent partnership opportunities, making them ideal victims for his exploitation schemes that relied on authentic-seeming testimonials and peer recommendations rather than traditional advertising approaches that might trigger regulatory scrutiny. Hazel's follower demographics had made her particularly valuable to his operation because her audience consisted primarily of young women interested in sustainable living and financial independence, representing exactly the vulnerable population that was most likely to trust wellness industry recommendations and invest money in cryptocurrency ventures without conducting adequate due diligence or seeking professional financial advice before making significant financial commitments. The federal charges filed against Ryder included securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, operating an unlicensed financial services business, and violations of FDA regulations related to supplement marketing and health claims, carrying potential prison sentences that could total several decades if he was convicted on all counts, with prosecutors indicating their intention to seek maximum penalties due to the sophisticated nature of the scheme and the large number of victims. Across multiple jurisdictions, Hazel faced potential criminal liability as well, though prosecutors appeared to be treating her as both a victim and unwitting accomplice rather than a mastermind, focusing their criminal charges on Ryder while pursuing civil remedies against Hazel for the financial damages suffered by her followers who'd been influenced by her promotional content and personal endorsements of fraudulent products and investment opportunities. The financial consequences for Hazel were devastating and immediate, with legal fees, potential civil liability, and the complete collapse of her income streams creating a crisis that would have been impossible to predict based on her social media success and apparent business prosperity just weeks earlier when she'd been celebrating partnership milestones and revenue growth through carefully staged content about her entrepreneurial journey. The waterfront apartment she'd maintained after my departure became unaffordable without the steady income from brand partnerships and sponsored content, forcing her to break her lease and move back in with her sister's family while dealing with the legal and financial fallout from her association with Ryder's criminal enterprise and the mounting costs of legal representation necessary to navigate both criminal and civil proceedings. Her social media presence, which had been carefully cultivated over years of content creation and audience building, became a permanent record of her involvement in fraudulent activities that would make rebuilding her career in the wellness industry virtually impossible regardless of the ultimate legal outcome, with archived posts and cached content providing evidence of her promotional activities that could be used against her in both legal proceedings and future employment background checks. Meanwhile, Ryder had disappeared completely, apparently fleeing the country before federal agents could execute arrest warrants, leaving Hazel to face the legal, financial, and reputational consequences of their partnership alone while he attempted to establish new fraudulent operations in jurisdictions with less aggressive financial crime enforcement and regulatory oversight. Hazel's desperation reached me through increasingly frantic digital channels that demonstrated both her resourcefulness and her complete inability to accept that I had moved on permanently from our failed relationship and her toxic life choices that had led to criminal investigation and financial ruin. The first attempts came through professional marine biology networks, with LinkedIn messages that tried to frame her outreach as legitimate scientific collaboration rather than personal crisis management and emotional manipulation designed to re-establish contact after 18 months of complete separation. She'd found my new affiliation with the Berlin Marine Research Institute through academic publications and conference listings, crafting elaborate messages about potential partnerships between American wellness education and European environmental research that were transparently desperate attempts to re-establish contact under professional pretenses that might bypass my obvious unwillingness to engage with her personal drama and legal troubles. Her messages referenced our shared history of environmental activism and suggested that my marine research expertise could provide scientific credibility for her efforts to rebuild her wellness platform with more legitimate, evidence-based content focused on ocean conservation and sustainable living practices rather than the cryptocurrency speculation and fraudulent health supplements that had destroyed her career and resulted in federal criminal charges. When professional networking approaches failed to generate responses after multiple attempts over several weeks, she escalated to encrypted messaging apps, somehow obtaining my contact information through mutual acquaintances or social media investigation that required significant effort and demonstrated her unwillingness to respect the boundaries I'd established through my complete disappearance from Charleston and systematic erasure of all connections to our shared past. These messages were more personal and increasingly desperate, acknowledging the federal investigation and legal troubles while positioning herself as a victim of Ryder's manipulation rather than an active participant in fraudulent business practices that had harmed thousands of wellness community members who trusted her recommendations and personal endorsements of cryptocurrency investment opportunities and unlicensed health products. She detailed her financial devastation, mounting legal expenses, and social isolation while implying that our previous relationship entitled her to my support and assistance during her crisis, apparently forgetting that she'd publicly humiliated me and dismissed me as easily replaceable while choosing excitement and entrepreneurial adventure over stability and genuine partnership that could have provided the foundation for building something meaningful together. Her encrypted messages became longer and more emotionally manipulative over time, combining appeals to our shared history with detailed descriptions of her current living situation with her sister's family, her inability to find legitimate employment due to the scandal's impact on her reputation throughout the wellness industry, and her growing realization that she'd made catastrophic decisions that had destroyed everything positive in her life, including our relationship and the stable support system I'd provided. The most audacious attempt came when she contacted the Berlin Marine Research Institute directly, claiming to be a former research partner from Charleston who needed to reach me regarding urgent matters related to our previous collaborative projects on coastal ecosystem recovery and sustainable lifestyle education initiatives that required immediate attention and coordination between American and European research institutions. The Institute's administrative staff, unaware of our personal history and the criminal investigation surrounding her wellness platform, initially forwarded her inquiries to my department, where Dr. Richter mentioned receiving unusual requests for my personal contact information from someone claiming professional connection to my previous American research work. I explained the situation briefly as personal matters that needed to be redirected through official channels, and the Institute implemented protective measures to prevent further unauthorized contact attempts while maintaining my privacy and professional reputation from whatever drama Hazel was attempting to create across international borders through false pretenses and misrepresentation of professional relationships. Her sister and parents began reaching out to my former Charleston contacts, including colleagues at the aquarium and mutual friends from our pottery classes and social circles, demanding that they provide my contact information or relay messages about Hazel's deteriorating mental health and financial situation that was apparently becoming concerning enough to prompt family intervention and attempts to mobilize external support networks. These family members positioned themselves as concerned intermediates trying to facilitate reconciliation for Hazel's emotional well-being, suggesting that I had some moral responsibility to provide closure or support during her crisis because of our previous relationship and the emotional investment we'd shared during our 3 years together, conveniently ignoring her public dismissal of that relationship and her deliberate choice to prioritize Ryder's business opportunities over supporting my international career advancement. The climactic confrontation finally occurred during my brief return to Charleston for a marine conservation symposium hosted by my former institution, an academic event focused on international collaboration in coastal ecosystem research that provided legitimate reason for my first visit to the city since my strategic departure 18 months earlier when I'd systematically erased myself from our shared life while Hazel was distracted by her business development activities with Ryder in Miami. I'd specifically chosen to stay at a hotel near the university rather than my old neighborhood, hoping to avoid unnecessary encounters with people from my previous life who might create awkward situations or emotional complications that could interfere with my professional obligations during the conference and potentially compromise my reputation among colleagues who knew me only as a serious researcher. The symposium reception was held at the aquarium where I'd worked for 3 years, transforming familiar laboratory spaces into networking venues where marine researchers from across the southeastern United States gathered to discuss collaborative opportunities and share research findings about climate change impacts on coastal ecosystems and innovative approaches to environmental conservation that represented cutting-edge work being conducted across international research networks. I was presenting findings from our Berlin microplastics research to colleagues who remembered me from my Charleston tenure. Enjoying conversations about career advancement and international collaboration opportunities that validated my decision to pursue European research opportunities rather than remaining in Charleston's more limited academic environment where personal relationships often interfered with professional development and scientific advancement. That's when Hazel appeared near the reception entrance, having apparently learned about the event through social media monitoring or academic networks that still connected her to my professional activities despite our complete personal separation and her lack of any legitimate scientific credentials that would justify attendance at specialized marine conservation conferences. She looked dramatically different from the confident wellness influencer I'd left behind, wearing subdued clothing that suggested financial constraints rather than her previous carefully curated aesthetic of designer wellness wear, with an expression of desperate determination that made nearby conversations pause as people sensed underlying tension developing in what should have been a professional networking environment. She approached me directly during a break between presentation sessions, ignoring the academic context and other attendees who were observing our interaction with obvious curiosity about the personal dynamics playing out in their professional space, apparently unconcerned about creating awkward situations for colleagues who knew me only as a respected researcher rather than someone connected to wellness industry figures under federal investigation. Her opening words immediately revealed the desperation and unrealistic expectations that had driven her to seek me out despite having no legitimate reason to expect sympathy or assistance after her previous treatment of our relationship and her subsequent life choices that had resulted in criminal investigation and financial devastation affecting thousands of wellness community members who trusted her recommendations. She launched into a frantic explanation of her current situation, emphasizing Ryder's manipulation and betrayal while minimizing her own role in promoting fraudulent products and investment schemes that had harmed thousands of wellness community members who trusted her recommendations and personal endorsements of cryptocurrency opportunities and unlicensed health supplements. Her plea for reconciliation or assistance was based on revisionist history that portrayed our relationship as mutually loving and supportive rather than acknowledging her public dismissal of me as easily replaceable or her decision to prioritize Ryder's entrepreneurial excitement over my career advancement opportunities and international research collaborations that represented everything I'd worked toward professionally. I listened to her desperate monologue while maintaining professional composure, aware that our conversation was being observed by colleagues who knew me as a serious researcher rather than someone involved in personal drama with wellness industry figures under federal investigation for criminal business practices that had exploited vulnerable communities. When she finished her appeal, I responded with calm directness that acknowledged her situation without accepting responsibility for providing support or solutions to problems that resulted from her own choices and partnership decisions that had explicitly excluded my input or consideration during our relationship and her business development activities with Ryder. I reminded her of her public declaration at the wellness conference that I was easily replaceable while Ryder represented irreplaceable business vision, pointing out that she was now experiencing the consequences of that choice and seeking replacement comfort from someone she'd previously dismissed as insufficient for her entrepreneurial ambitions and lifestyle goals that had prioritized excitement over stability. The same people who'd witnessed her humiliating dismissal of me at the wellness conference were now observing her desperate attempt to reconnect with the stability and support she'd rejected in favor of excitement and cryptocurrency adventure that had ultimately revealed itself as criminal fraud designed to exploit vulnerable wellness communities. I concluded our conversation by wishing her well with her legal and financial challenges while making clear that I'd moved on permanently to international research opportunities that provided both professional advancement and personal fulfillment that I'd never experienced during our relationship or my previous Charleston life where I'd been taken for granted and ultimately discarded when more exciting options became available through her renewed partnership with Ryder. Then I returned to my conference obligations and international career that represented everything I'd worked toward professionally, while Hazel faced the long-term consequences of choosing superficial excitement over genuine partnership and the kind of stable support that builds meaningful futures rather than destroying them through poor judgment and criminal association with fraudulent enterprises that had systematically exploited vulnerable wellness communities for financial gain at the expense of trusting people who'd believed completely in her sincere recommendations and personal endorsements of dangerous, unlicensed health products.